The ancient stones of Hogwarts typically hummed with a low, resonant magic, a living symphony lost to most. But to Jaxen Kael, perched on a discarded workbench in a forgotten storage room, that hum was a data stream. He felt it, not through his ears, but through the neural port at his temple, a subtle thrum against the titanium alloy plating beneath his skin. This room, tucked away behind a tapestry depicting a particularly disgruntled badger, was his sanctuary. It smelled of dust, old potions, and the faint, ozone tang of his own illicit technology. He ran a synthetic thumb over the polished obsidian surface of his data slate, its minimalist design a stark contrast to the Gothic arches above. The slate was more than a tablet, it was a physical extension of his neural network, a remote access point to his own augmented mind. His breath plumed faintly in the cool air, a natural anomaly in a body that ran colder than most. Aura, initiate neural uplink. Standard diagnostics, then full spectrum scan of the portrait network. His voice, usually guarded, held a quiet authority when he spoke to his AI. It wasn't just a voice command. The thought solidified in his mind, and Aura, ever present, ever vigilant, responded. A faint, almost imperceptible warmth spread from his temple. It wasn't a natural sensation. It was the whisper of nanites engaging, the subtle click of the neural interface locking into place. His vision sharpened, colors gaining a new vibrancy. The intricate cracks in the stone wall, the motes of dust dancing in the sliver of moonlight, all rendered with crystalline clarity. This was his true sight, enhanced, augmented. Neural uplink established, Jaxen. Biometrics stable. External ward interference minimal within current parameters. Proceeding with full-spectrum portrait network scan. Aura's voice was a calm, synthesized contralto in his mind, devoid of emotion, yet infinitely reassuring. She was his anchor, his confidant, the one part of him that understood the delicate dance between circuit and spell. Jaxen closed his eyes, focusing inward. The world blurred, then reformed into something else entirely. It wasn't what most saw. He perceived energy signatures, magical pathways shimmering like invisible rivers across the school's layout. The wards, usually a chaotic, defensive wall to Muggle tech, were different for him. His cybernetics, forged in the crucible of that catastrophic accident, weren't designed to fight magic, but to interface with it. To read it. To translate it into data. The portrait network, a vast, sentient tapestry woven through centuries of magic, came alive in his mind's eye. Each painting, from the haughty nobles on the grand staircase to the obscure, dozing landscapes in forgotten corridors, pulsed with a unique magical signature. Aura mapped them, not as individual entities, but as nodes in a sprawling, organic information grid. He saw the flow of conversation, like invisible threads connecting one portrait to another. He heard snippets, not actual sound, but the data of their communications, translated into a stream of semantic fragments in his peripheral awareness. Old Professor Phineas Nigellus Black grumbling about unruly students, a group of stern-faced witches debating the latest Quidditch match, a landscape portrait in the third-floor corridor remarking on the unusual chill. It was overwhelming, yet Jaxen navigated it with practiced ease. This was his solace, his strength. Here, he wasn't the broken cyborg, the Muggle anomaly. Here, he was the conductor of a silent, digital symphony. Filter for anomalous energy signatures, Jaxen commanded, his voice barely a whisper. Specifically, anything with a resonance frequency outside of typical Hogwarts ambient magic, or patterns indicative of sustained, focused magical exertion. Applying filters. Processing. Aura's response was immediate. The vibrant network in his mind dimmed, the mundane chatter fading. What remained were pinpricks of light, glowing with different intensities and hues. Most were faint, the lingering magic of charms classes, potion spills, or student duels. Others were brighter, the consistent magic of ward stones, power conduits, or deeply enchanted artifacts. He began to explore, drifting through the digital architecture of the castle. He saw the shimmering aura of the Great Hall, a confluence of daily enchantments and residual communal magic. The library glowed with ancient spells of preservation and knowledge. The dungeons, predictably, had darker, heavier signatures, remnants of centuries of potent, often grim, magic. He found unexpected pathways too. A faint, almost forgotten vein of magic running beneath the kitchens, leading to what appeared to be an ancient, disused storage space. A series of interconnected enchantments behind a statue of a one-eyed witch, clearly a secret passage. These were the veins and arteries of Hogwarts, visible only to his unique sight. He cataloged them, already formulating potential uses. Knowledge was power, and in his isolated existence, it was the only power he truly trusted. His gaze, or rather, his perception, settled on the upper floors, near the headmistress's office. A bright, complex signature pulsed there, strong and consistent. Headmistress Blackwood was a powerful witch, a traditionalist to her core. It wasn't surprising her chambers hummed with significant magic. What was surprising was the subtle oscillation within that signature. A regular pulse, almost like a heartbeat, but too mechanical, too rhythmic for natural magic. Aura, zoom and analyze signature around Headmistress Blackwood's private study. Focus on that oscillatory anomaly. Cross-reference with known magical energy patterns, both contemporary and historical. Affirmative. Analyzing. The analysis took longer this time. Aura was sifting through vast databases, comparing this unique magical signature to everything she had cataloged, everything Jaxen had fed her over the years. He watched, a prickle of unease beginning to form. This wasn't the kind of magic you'd expect from a headmistress known for her staunch adherence to ancient traditions. This felt engineered, controlled. Then, a breakthrough. Anomaly identified. Signature contains traces of unstable arithmancy sequences, intertwined with archaic runic constructs. No exact match found in known magical theory. Closest approximation. Partial match with Forbidden Archives Entry 7b, Principles of Eldritch Manipulation, by Silas Thorne, pre-17th century. Jackson's cybernetic heart, a silent, efficient marvel of engineering, didn't skip a beat, but a cold dread seeped into his bones. Silas Thorne. He knew the name. A forgotten, disgraced dark wizard whose theories had been erased from most magical texts for being too dangerous, too radical. Eldritch manipulation wasn't just dark magic, it was magic that tampered with the fundamental fabric of reality, often with horrifying consequences. Why would Blackwood, the paragon of tradition, be dabbling in something so taboo? His internal query was interrupted by a new, more unsettling flicker in the network. Not near Blackwood's office, but deep within the dungeons, in a section he had initially dismissed as innocuous, a series of rarely used storage vaults. A burst of energy, sharp and violent, momentarily flared before being swiftly suppressed. It was crude, uncontrolled, and felt like a raw wound in the magical fabric of the castle. And then a whisper. Not data, not semantic fragments, but an actual whisper, a faint, disembodied sound that bypassed Aura's translation protocols and resonated directly with his neural implant. It was faint, ancient, and filled with a chilling echo of pain. Sacrifices, for power, always the same. The hum, the fracture. The sound was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by the persistent, rhythmic hum from Blackwood's office and the residual, fading imprint of the dungeon burst. It had come from a portrait he hadn't even consciously registered, a faded, almost blank canvas in a forgotten corridor leading to the lower levels. It was an old painting showing only a desolate, fog-shrouded moor. But the magic emanating from it, for that brief moment, had been profoundly distressed. Jackson's analytical mind whirred, attempting to rationalize. A malfunction? A localized magical echo? But Aura's diagnostic indicated his systems were running perfectly. The whisper had been real. A sentient portrait, reaching out, or perhaps just an echo of its own buried memory. He reopened his physical eyes, the stark reality of the dusty storage room returning. The hum of his tech felt louder now, less comforting, more like a warning. He stared at the ancient stone wall, seeing not just the cracks, but the unseen pathways, the hidden history, the silent cries woven into the very fabric of Hogwarts. The hum from Blackwood's study, The violent burst in the dungeons, and that chilling whisper. They were connected. He felt it with the intuitive certainty of a system detecting a critical error. His accident, his transformation, had left him with a desperate need for answers. And now, through the very tools that marked him as an outcast, he was finding them. He was seeing the true face of Hogwarts, a face far darker and more dangerous than any textbook dared to describe. And somewhere in that deepening darkness, he knew, lay the truth of what had happened to him. The hunt had begun. The antechamber to the disused Transfiguration classroom was perpetually dim, choked with forgotten tapestries and the faint scent of dust and ancient magic. For Jaxen, it was a sanctuary. Here, perched on a precariously balanced stack of mildewed textbooks, he could truly see. His neural interface hummed, a low, comforting vibration against his temporal lobe, as he plunged deeper into the circulatory system of Hogwarts, the portraits. Aura, optimized for anomalous energy signatures, he murmured, his voice barely a breath, lost in the echoing silence. Affirmative, Jaxen, Aura's synthesized voice whispered directly into his mind, bypassing his auditory implants to resonate within his own thoughts. Filtering for deviations from ambient magical baseline. Prioritizing sustained, high-power emanations. His vision shifted, the faded tapestry before him dissolving into a vibrant, multi-layered data stream. He wasn't just looking at the portrait of a snoozing knight anymore. He was inside it, writing the ebb and flow of its magical signature. The entire castle, normally a chaotic cacophony of magical energies to his enhanced senses, now rendered itself as a sprawling, interconnected network. Each portrait was a node, a living camera, a data conduit. Aura had spent weeks mapping their individual magical frequencies, their typical movement patterns, their blind spots. Now, Jaxen was exploiting that map. He surfed through the network, a phantom presence. From the third-floor corridors chattering old crones, he jumped to the bustling first-floor common room scenes, then to the silent, watchful eyes of the headmaster's gallery. He saw students sneaking out after curfew, house elves polishing silver, ghosts gliding through walls, all filtered through Aura's objective lens, highlighted with faint, glowing magical outlines. It was a dizzying, exhilarating expansion of perception. He was everywhere, yet nowhere. His cybernetic eyes, behind his unblinking eyelids, rapidly processed streams of data, translating raw magical energy into comprehensible patterns. He was searching for the telltale ripples that had hinted at something unnatural in his last session. Hours blurred into a singular, focused moment. The ambient hum of Hogwarts magic was a familiar melody, but then Aura pinged. Moderate, sustained energy fluctuation detected. Source localized to Sector Gamma 7. Consistent with unusual arcane manipulation. Sector Gamma 7. That was deep in the dungeons, an area historically linked to ancient wards and restricted storage. He focused, pushing his mental interface to its limits. The portraits in that area were old, less mobile, less inclined to gossip. Their magical signatures were dense, almost stagnant. He struggled to gain a clear view. Aura projected an estimate, an echo of power, like a pulse, resonating within the stone. He felt a faint pressure behind his eyes, a familiar strain that told him his magical cores were beginning to interface with his tech in a way not yet fully understood. His systems were not just reading magic, they were drawing from it, using it to power his enhanced perception. Suddenly, a flicker. A rarely used portrait of a stern-faced alchemist, usually lost in contemplation, briefly showed something else. Not a natural movement, but a distortion. A ripple of purple-black energy, like spilled ink, briefly stained the edges of the canvas before receding, leaving the alchemist once again in stoic repose. Jaxen gasped, a short, sharp intake of breath, startling himself. He hadn't realized he was holding it. Anomalous energy signature confirmed. Intensity rising. Repeated occurrences, Jaxen. The source is actively generating these fluctuations, Aura informed him, her voice holding a rare note of urgency. He tried to trace it, but the trail was cold. The portrait had returned to normal. It was a fragment, a whisper. But it was there. He felt a sudden prickle of being watched, a sensation that had nothing to do with his cybernetics. He tore his gaze away from the tapestry, letting his enhanced vision revert to normal, though the faint overlay of Aura's data still shimmered at the edges of his sight. Leaning against the doorframe, a scroll of ancient runes clutched in her hand, stood Alara Vance. Her sharp, intelligent eyes, usually softened by curiosity, were narrowed, fixed on him with an intensity that made him acutely uncomfortable. She hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but her presence was a physical weight. "Jaxen Kael," she said, her voice a calm, even tone that still managed to cut through his focus. "Are you communicating with the portraits?" He froze. His mind raced. Had she seen? How much? He prided himself on his stealth, his ability to blend into the shadows of Hogwarts, a ghost among the living. "I don't know what you're talking about, Vance," he replied, his voice clipped, his gaze darting around the room, searching for an escape route. Alara pushed off the doorframe, taking a step closer. "Don't you? I've seen you. For weeks, actually. Holed up in forgotten corners, staring intently at frames, your eyes, doing something strange. And now, I just saw you gasp and convulse." She gestured vaguely with the scroll. "Your attention isn't on this reality, is it? It's somewhere else." She wasn't accusing, not yet. She was observing, dissecting. The quintessential Ravenclaw. "I was meditating," he offered weakly, a lie that felt clumsy even to him. Alara raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement playing on her lips, but her eyes remained serious. "Meditating? In an antechamber full of dust bunnies and a perpetually snoring knight? And it makes your pupils dilate like you've just seen a Dementor? Fascinating technique, Kael. Pray tell, is it a newly discovered branch of occlumency?" He felt his internal temperature rising. He hated being cornered. Hated being seen. His cybernetics were his shield, his secret. Revealing them meant vulnerability, pity, fear. "What do you want, Vance?" he snapped, standing up, the old books clattering to the floor. Alara didn't flinch. "Answers. Or, failing that, perhaps an explanation for why you're tracking something generating extremely anomalous magical energy within the school." His breath hitched. He hadn't said anything about energy. "Warning, Jaxen. Her inquiry is accurate. She is either a highly skilled legilimens or has detected the residual energy emanations from your recent activity," Aura's alert flashed. "How? How would you know about that?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Alara sighed, her gaze drifting briefly to the tapestry he'd been focused on. "I'm a fifth-year Ravenclaw, Jaxen. I spend a considerable amount of time in the library, in ancient runes classes, and, yes, observing the less obvious goings-on in Hogwarts. You're not as subtle as you think. And those energy spikes? They're not just affecting your meditations. They've been causing minor disruptions in the wards, a faint ripple that only someone attuned to certain ancient magic might notice. Something I've been studying." She tapped her scroll. "They're growing stronger." He stared at her, a silent battle raging within him. She wasn't just guessing. She knew. Or at least, she was dangerously close to knowing. He couldn't risk her talking, not yet. "The energy fluctuations are increasing exponentially, Jaxen. New source signature detected, more potent than previous instances. Located directly beneath the Great Hall. Suggest immediate investigation." Aura interrupted his thoughts, her voice now a sharp command. The Great Hall. That was right in the heart of the school. Far too central for any legitimate, high-power experimentation. This was bigger than a few purple flickers. He made a decision. It was a risk, but keeping Alara in the dark felt more dangerous than bringing her into the periphery of his secret. "Follow me," he said, turning abruptly and heading for the antechamber door. "And don't say a word about what you think you've seen to anyone." Alara, for all her sharp wits, seemed surprised by his sudden capitulation. But her curiosity clearly outweighed her caution. She hurried after him, the scroll still clutched in her hand. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice hushed. "To find the source," Jaxen replied, his strides lengthening. His mind was already miles ahead, his internal systems mapping out the quickest route, identifying the most reliable portrait nodes to give him real-time intel. The dungeon was one thing, but beneath the Great Hall? That was a declaration. As they navigated the labyrinthine corridors, Jaxen kept his enhanced senses tuned. Aura's projections overlaid his vision, a faint, pulsing red aura now emanating directly beneath their feet, growing stronger with every step they took towards the main body of the castle. They reached a secluded passage near the kitchens, a forgotten stone staircase spiraling down into deeper darkness. The air grew colder, heavier, charged with an almost palpable hum. The energy signature is now unequivocally anomalous, Jaxen. Highly unstable. Magical containment field detected, severely stressed. Suggest caution. It borders on. Forbidden magical energy, Aura warned, her voice losing its synthetic calm, replaced by an urgent, almost human concern. Jaxen felt a knot tighten in his gut. Forbidden magical energy. That was the stuff of dark arts textbooks, not Hogwarts basements. As they descended the ancient stairs, the hum intensified, vibrating through the very stone. Suddenly, Jaxen's internal systems flared. A jolt, like an electric shock, shot through his cybernetics. His vision swam with chaotic data, Aura's normally precise projections dissolving into static. What was that? Alara gasped, clutching his arm. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. The air around them crackled. Through the static, a single, horrifying image burned itself into Jaxen's enhanced sight, a fleeting glimpse of what Aura was processing, a chamber, deep beneath the castle, bathed in an unnatural, sickly green light. Figures moved within, cloaked and indistinct, but at the center of the room, held within a shimmering, unstable ward, was a swirling vortex of pure, raw magic. It pulsed, a malevolent heart, threatening to burst free. And for a split second, as the vortex flared, casting its hideous light outwards, he saw a face. Headmistress Blackwood. Her stern features were illuminated, not by the green light, but by a flicker of triumph, a chilling zeal, as she stood before the churning chaos, her hand outstretched, as if commanding it. Then, just as quickly, the image vanished, consumed by the overwhelming feedback from his nearly overloaded systems. The magical feedback from the experiment's sudden surge had almost fried his interface. But he had seen enough. The truth, or at least a terrifying fragment of it, had just revealed itself. Blackwood. Forbidden magic. Deep beneath Hogwarts. And then, just as his vision began to clear, Aura screamed in his mind, warning. Direct magical counter-detection. They know you're here, Jaxen. Retreat. Footsteps echoed from below, heavy and swift, accompanied by the swish of robes. They were coming. The air in the deserted East Wing corridor hummed with the stale scent of ancient parchment and dust, a stark contrast to the buzzing data streams Jaxen Kael was currently processing. He was immersed, Aura's algorithms sifting through the visual feed from a portrait of a bewildered medieval knight, when a sharp voice cut through his internal monologue. Jaxen Kael. A word. He snapped his head up, his augmented eye briefly flickering with a ghost of green light that only Alara Vance seemed to catch. She stood a few feet away, arms crossed, her expression a mix of analytical scrutiny and controlled frustration. Her dark, braided hair was pulled back from a face currently set in an unyielding line. Jaxen felt a jolt of alarm, a purely organic sensation that Aura immediately flagged as elevated stress response. He quickly masked his surprise, his voice carefully neutral. Alara. Something wrong. Wrong? Perhaps the better question is, what exactly is wrong with you? She took a step closer, her eyes scanning his face with an unnerving intensity. I've seen you. Drifting through the corridors, eyes glazed over as if you're seeing things no one else can. Hovering by ancient portraits, whispering to yourself. And the energy fluctuations, they're subtle, almost imperceptible, but my runic detectors have been going haywire around you. He tried to deflect. I'm merely observing, Alara. Hogwarts is a fascinating place. Don't patronize me, Jaxen. Her voice was quiet, but held a steel that made him pause. I spent a week tracking the anomalous magical residue that seems to emanate from your vicinity whenever you're observing. It's not traditional magic, nor is it a simple magical device. It feels alien. Like something is interfacing with the magical currents, not just using them. And that, Kael, shouldn't be possible. His internal processors whirred. She was closer to the truth than anyone had ever been. His options were limited: lie poorly and risk her exposing him to Blackwood, or trust her. A foreign, unsettling concept. You're observant, he admitted, his gaze drifting to a tapestry depicting a hunt, its figures eerily still. Observant enough to notice that the particular portrait of Alara the Melodious in the West Tower has been reporting an unusual number of nocturnal strolls lately, she pressed, referring to a portrait he'd specifically tasked Aura with monitoring for the energy signatures from Chapter 2. Strolls that coincide precisely with your late-night movements. Are you using the portraits, Jaxen? He exhaled slowly. The tapestry blurred slightly as his optical sensors refocused, running a quick profile analysis on Alara: high intelligence, strong moral compass, fiercely loyal to truth. Risks acceptable. Follow me, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. He led her not far, into a small, seldom-used alcove tucked behind a forgotten statue of a grumpy-looking gargoyle. Once they were out of sight, he leaned against the cold stone, took a deep breath, and prepared to shatter his carefully constructed wall. What I'm about to show you, it's a secret. A profound one. If it gets out, my life here, potentially my life, is over. His cybernetic hand unconsciously went to his neck, where the subtle lines of his implants disappeared under his skin. Alara's expression softened, curiosity overriding suspicion. I understand the weight of secrets, Jaxen. But if you're involved in something dangerous, something that's affecting Hogwarts, then I have a right to know. And a duty to protect it. He nodded, a flicker of appreciation for her unwavering integrity. It started with an accident. In the Muggle world, before Hogwarts. A lab, an experiment, a fusion of nascent magical energies and advanced technology. He pulled back the collar of his robes, revealing the faint, intricate lines of a neural port just behind his ear and the subtle, almost imperceptible gleam of a reinforced optic nerve leading into his eye. I died, Alara. Or I should have. My Muggle parents, brilliant in their own right, refused to let that happen. They built me this. He gestured vaguely at himself. Cybernetics. Not just prosthetics, but a complete neural interface, integrated with an AI, Aura, that allowed me to survive. But the magic from the accident, it twisted everything. Traditional tech breaks around strong magic. My system integrates it. It's designed to perceive and process magical energies, to interact with the world in ways neither fully magical nor fully Muggle. Alara's eyes were wide, scanning the subtle lines he revealed, her mind undoubtedly racing to reconcile this impossible reality with her understanding of the world. You're a cyborg? And your tech, it works with magic. Her voice was barely a whisper. That's unprecedented. Impossible. Not impossible, just groundbreaking and dangerous, he corrected. The Hogwarts wards see me as an anomaly, but they don't register my tech as invasive in the traditional sense, because it exploits the pre-existing magical network. Specifically, the portraits. He paused, allowing her to process. My goal here isn't to cause trouble. It's to find answers. About the accident, about what I am. And the portraits, they're my eyes and ears. An unprecedented surveillance network. He extended his augmented hand, a subtle shimmer of light emanating from his palm. Aura projected a holographic display of the Hogwarts map, overlaid with countless glowing nodes, each representing a sentient portrait. Lines of data flowed between them, forming a complex web. I perceived the magical signatures of the portraits, their subtle changes, their movements. I can even interpret their thoughts, their observations, through a form of magical data mining. Alara stared at the display, her initial shock giving way to scientific fascination. A living information network, and you've hacked it. That's incredible. And terrifying. What have you seen? Fragments, he said, dimming the map and pulling up a series of recorded visual feeds, all from different portraits. Strange energy fluctuations near the forbidden section of the library. Sporadic reports from portraits in forgotten corridors about shadowy figures moving through them after curfew. And most recently, He played a clip from a portrait of a stern-faced headmaster from the 18th century, positioned in a rarely used staircase near the dungeons. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. Headmistress Blackwood, her usually immaculate robes subtly disheveled, her face drawn, emerging from a magically concealed door that even Alara hadn't known existed. She carried a small, glowing vial, its contents shimmering with a sickly, violet light. Her lips were moving, too low for the portrait to discern clear words, but the feeling of urgency, of secrecy, was palpable. That door, it's hidden behind a powerful disillusionment charm and a runic ward for magical absorption, Alara murmured, her eyes narrowing as she analyzed the image. Only someone intimately familiar with ancient dark arts or extremely powerful would know how to conceal it so thoroughly. And that vial, the energy radiating from it is potent, but unstable. It feels parasitic. Parasitic. That's an interesting descriptor. Aura noted a similar energetic signature in the fluctuations from a few weeks ago, Jaxen said, pointing to a data overlay on the video. Blackwood was carrying it. And that chamber. Aura's analysis of the portrait's magical field detects a massive, ancient magical ward beyond that door. But it's not protecting something, Alara. It's containing something. Alara's gaze snapped back to the projected image of Blackwood. Containing, or harvesting. The magical absorption ward, if it's designed to siphon energy, not just block it, then what is she doing in there? And with that vial, her mind, honed by years of studying ancient magical history, began to connect the dots Jaxen's tech had only presented. There are legends of certain forbidden rituals, long outlawed, that sought to harness raw, chaotic magic by essentially bleeding it from ancient ley lines or even unwilling magical creatures. The byproduct, it often appeared as a volatile, violet essence, capable of tremendous power but at an unbearable cost. She pointed to another data stream, one Jaxen had only partially understood. This runic sequence aura detected around the chamber entrance, it's a variant of a forgotten Gremian binding ritual. It's not meant to protect against a threat. It's meant to control one, to force it into submission. A dark ward, Jaxen. One used to extract something. The implications hit Jaxen like a physical blow. So Blackwood isn't just conducting forbidden research. She's actively siphoning, extracting dangerous magical energy. And if she's doing that, for what purpose? What is she building? Or worse, what is she feeding? Alara's face was grim. Remember the vanishing cabinet incidents from earlier this year? The surge of wild magic that destabilized the local teleportation network? The ministry attributed it to a magical surge, but what if it was a symptom? A tremor from something far more sinister being actively drawn up beneath our very feet. Jaxen felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold stone walls. The fragments now clicked into a terrifying mosaic. Blackwood, the ancient wards, the violet essence, the unstable energy. It wasn't just research. It was an active, dangerous extraction, and its scale was far beyond anything he'd imagined. This explains why she's so obsessed with purity, Alara whispered, looking at Jaxen with renewed fear in her eyes, not for him, but for the revelation they had uncovered. She's trying to control a chaotic force she herself has unleashed, or is attempting to weaponize. And your existence, Jaxen, your very nature as a bridge between worlds, it's an abomination to her because it threatens the pristine separation she needs to maintain her control. He looked at the projected image of the headmistress, her face a mask of weary determination, now reinterpreted as a chilling fanaticism. She's not protecting Hogwarts. She's endangering it. And us. If she's actively tampering with a volatile magical source this powerful, Hogwarts itself could be torn apart. Alara's gaze hardened, meeting his. Then we have to stop her. But Jaxen, if she's capable of this, what makes you think she hasn't already accounted for someone like you watching? What if this isn't just a hidden experiment, but a trap already set? The words hung in the air, a cold, terrifying promise of retaliation. The fragments coalesced, spiraling into a horrifying clarity within Jaxen's neural interface. He and Alara stood hunched over a shimmering projection in the room of requirement, a kaleidoscope of ancient runic diagrams, arcane energy schematics, and chillingly familiar biometric data. Data that bore an unsettling resemblance to Jaxen's own early medical records. "This is monstrous," Alara breathed, her face pale, the usual spark of intellectual curiosity replaced by profound revulsion. "She's not just experimenting with dark magic, Jaxen. She's trying to contain or repurpose something incredibly volatile. This isn't theoretical. This looks like she's trying to weaponize magic." Aura's voice, usually calm and analytical, had a subtle edge of alarm. "Warning, Jaxen. I am detecting an unprecedented surge in localized magical energy originating from the Headmistress's tower. Her wards are activating in an aggressive, probing manner. It feels like an intelligence search." Jaxen felt a jolt of ice in his stomach. She knows. She's discovered the anomaly. His cybernetic eye flickered, zooming in on a specific runic sequence that flashed in the projection. This sequence, it's designed to identify and disrupt non-magical intrusions within a magical network. "My signature. She's hunting me." Just then, the very air around them thickened, growing heavy with magic. The vibrant tapestry portraits adorning the Room of Requirements walls, usually bustling with activity, suddenly went still, their painted occupants frozen in mid-gesture, their gazes blank. Aura's connection to the wider network sputtered, individual portrait feeds dying out like extinguished candles. "She's casting an anti-intrusion flux," Alara gasped, recognizing the ancient magic. A ward designed to isolate and then disintegrate any foreign magical or technological entity trying to piggyback on Hogwarts' native ley lines. It's powerful and incredibly dangerous. "Your systems, Jaxen, they won't withstand it." A searing pain lanced through Jaxen's head. His vision distorted, a kaleidoscope of fractured light and static. Aura's voice, now strained, crackled in his ear. "System integrity compromised. Feedback loops detected. Attempting to reroute magical energy, but the flux is aggressive. Critical overload imminent if direct exposure continues. We need to move." Alara grabbed his arm, pulling him towards a newly formed door that led to a rarely used service corridor. "She'll be sending patrols. We don't have much time before she physically tracks us down." They burst into the dimly lit corridor, the magical pressure outside the Room of Requirement less intense, but still palpable. The portraits here, thankfully, were merely sleeping, not actively hostile. Jaxen forced himself to focus, Aura struggling to re-establish fragmented connections. "Aura, can you give me any intel on patrol routes?" "Limited data," Aura responded, her voice clearer now, though still with a hint of digital strain. "Headmistress Blackwood has deployed magically animated gargoyles from her office, currently sweeping the upper floors. I also detect several professors, likely under her direct orders, and a contingent of senior prefects. Their movements are chaotic, but converging on this quadrant." "She's throwing everything at us," Alara muttered, her wand already in her hand, glowing faintly. "She's desperate to silence us." As they navigated the labyrinthine corridors, Jaxen could feel the school itself reacting. Ancient stones vibrated. Whispers from distant portraits, normally benign, now sounded like agitated murmurs. The anti-intrusion flux was a pervasive presence, a magical current trying to rip through his cybernetics, causing constant low-grade pain and flickering visual artifacts. Every step was a battle against his own biology and Blackwood's magic. They needed more. The fragments they had were damning, but circumstantial. To truly expose Blackwood to the Wisengamot, they needed undeniable proof. A full log, perhaps, or a recorded confession, or schematics for the devices she was building. "Aura, can you pinpoint the primary data nexus for the forbidden research?" Jaxen asked, gritting his teeth as another surge of energy sent a jolt through his spine. "Affirmative," Aura replied. "Based on the patterns observed in the retrieved fragments, the central hub appears to be located deep within the dungeons, directly beneath the Headmistress's private laboratory, what appears to be a magically insulated server room, likely utilizing ancient runic enchantments for data storage. It's heavily warded, even against traditional magical intrusion." "She wouldn't put something that important in a place easily accessible," Alara said, her eyes scanning a centuries-old tapestry depicting forgotten magical creatures. "She'd secure it with layers of magic, probably even older than the school itself. And she'll be expecting us to try and retrieve it. Then we go in, or I go in digitally, Jaxen decided, his gaze hardening. We need to override her wards, even if it means risking full system collapse. The truth is too important. They reached a neglected staircase spiraling down into the earth, reeking of damp stone and forgotten spells. The air grew colder, heavier. Blackwood's magical counteroffensive was escalating. They heard shouts from above, the heavy thud of enchanted armor. They're close. Alara hissed, peering back up the stairs. Jaxen, this is insane. What if you can't get out? What if she fries your brain? I don't have a choice, he said, the words rasping. This is what I was built for, in a twisted way. To interface with this. To understand it. He took a deep breath, the cold resolve settling over him. Aura, prepare for deepest penetration. I need you to prioritize data extraction over system preservation if it comes to it. Download everything. Acknowledged, Aura responded, her voice now a steely calm. Commencing full-spectrum bypass protocols. Prepare for severe system stress. They found a hidden alcove near the dungeon's entrance, obscured by a crumbling illusion charm Alara subtly reinforced. Jaxen sat down, closing his organic eye, his cybernetic one glowing faintly. He pushed past the pain, past the fear, and plunged into the raw, untamed magical current of Hogwarts. Aura acted as his guide, navigating the turbulent magical streams, identifying the intricate web of ancient wards Blackwood had woven around the data hub. It was like trying to thread a needle through a hurricane of pure energy. The anti-intrusion flux hammered at him, trying to tear his connection apart, to rip his consciousness from his body. Every nerve ending screamed. He could feel the fine wires in his skull heating, the artificial synapses straining under the magical overload. She's actively reinforcing the wards, Aura reported, her voice a series of rapid-fire data streams. Magical pressure increasing exponentially. Jaxen, you are approaching critical system failure. He ignored her, pushing deeper. He saw, through the lens of his cybernetics, the very essence of Blackwood's ward, a cold, dark magic, twisted and corrupted. He understood Alara's revulsion now. This wasn't merely protective magic, it was aggressive, hungry. It sought to consume. He used the portrait network, not just as a conduit, but as a distraction. He sent ripples through obscure portrait connections, creating phantom anomalies elsewhere in the castle, drawing Blackwood's attention away for precious seconds. He felt the mental strain of the sentient paintings as they flickered, their awareness momentarily hijacked and fragmented, and a pang of guilt shot through him. He was using them, just as Blackwood used her magic. But for a different purpose, he told himself. For the truth. Then he found it. The Nexus. A massive, crystalline magical matrix humming with stored data, pulsing with dark energy. It was beautiful and terrifying. He pushed his neural interface to its absolute limit, overriding Blackwood's modern enchantments by exploiting ancient runic loopholes that Alara had helped him identify. His mind bridged the gap between silicon and pure magic. The download began. A torrent of information flooded his senses. Arcane texts, schematics for a device that looked like a magical singularity generator, detailed notes on experimental subjects, each one more chilling than the last, and a personal journal belonging to Blackwood herself, filled with obsessive entries about purifying magic through controlled application of primordial energy. He saw glimpses of his own accident reflected in her notes, a specific, controlled release of raw magical power that had been deemed stable by her, yet clearly hadn't been. He felt the data, tasted its truth. This wasn't just forbidden experimentation, it was a plan to reshape magic itself, perhaps even to tap into the very fabric of Hogwarts' ancient power. Data packet secured, Aura announced, her voice strained but triumphant. Full logs, schematics, and Headmistress Blackwood's personal journal, magically encoded for integrity. Download complete. But the success came at a cost. The moment the data was secure, the resistance from Blackwood's wards amplified tenfold. A roar of pure magical energy ripped through his cybernetics. His vision exploded into white noise, then plunged into darkness. Pain unlike anything he'd ever known engulfed him. Jaxen. Alara's voice was a distant echo as she frantically tried to rouse him. He blacked out for a second, then consciousness ripped back, raw and fragmented. He was gasping, covered in a cold sweat. His cybernetic eye was rebooting, the image flickering back to life. Aura was still online, but barely. "We need to go," Alara urged, helping him up, her face etched with fear. "Now." She knows it's done. They stumbled back up the stairs, Jaxen's body screaming with residual pain, Aura running critical diagnostics in his ear. As they rounded a corner, preparing to slip into a lesser-used corridor that led towards the castle's outer grounds, a figure materialized directly in their path. Headmistress Blackwood stood there, wand held aloft, her face a mask of cold fury. Her eyes, usually sharp and calculating, now burned with a chilling, almost feral intensity. Behind her, the corridor was sealed by shimmering, obsidian wards. "So," she said, her voice like ice, "the little spy dares to steal from me. And you, Miss Vance, a Ravenclaw, dabbling in such crude betrayals. You've made a grave mistake." Jaxen felt the data packet, the truth, humming in his compromised systems. They had it, but they were trapped. Blackwood's wand glowed with malevolent power, pointed directly at them. "This little game of yours ends now," she declared, "and with it, your very existence." The air crackled, not just with the raw magical power emanating from Headmistress Blackwood, but with the frantic hum of Jaxen's cybernetics, Aura working overtime to shield his neural pathways. They were cornered in the hidden antechamber Jaxen had only recently discovered through the portraits, a forgotten study off the restricted section, its entrance now sealed by a shimmering ward of Blackwood's making. Dust motes danced in the sparse light filtering through a grimy window, reflecting the emerald glow of Blackwood's eyes. "You really thought you could hide from me, boy?" Blackwood's voice was a low growl, laced with venom. "To desecrate the very essence of Hogwarts with your abomination?" Her wand, an elegant, dark wood, twitched, sending tremors through the ancient stone. "We weren't hiding, Headmistress," Alara countered, her voice surprisingly steady despite the fear in her eyes. She stood protectively in front of a flickering portrait, one that Jaxen had repurposed as a direct link to his neural interface. "We were gathering proof." Professor Finch, ever the calm amidst the storm, stepped forward, his own wand held loosely. "Seraphina, think of the consequences. This path you've chosen is dangerous, not just for you, but for the very fabric of magic itself." "Consequences?" Blackwood scoffed. "The only consequence is the preservation of our world from Muggle contamination. And you, Alaric, facilitating it. You were always a fool, dreaming of blending what cannot be blended." She raised her wand, a dark, viscous energy coalescing at its tip. "Now, the charade ends." "Aura, divert maximum power to the shield protocols," Jaxen commanded internally, his eyes fixed on Blackwood. His hands moved with blurring speed, tapping commands into his wrist-mounted interface. "Alara, get ready." "Finch, we need a diversion. Something big." "Understood." Jaxen, Aura's synthesized voice buzzed in his ear, surprisingly calm. "Shield integrity at 78. Recommend immediate extraction or offensive action." "Offensive it is, Aura." "Prepare the grand projection protocol. Target the Great Hall's central dais, specifically the Founder's Tapestry. Full historical record, energy signatures, and all Blackwood's spoken commands." Finch understood instantly. With a roar, he unleashed a flurry of rapid-fire charms, shimmering blasts of light and force that slammed against Blackwood's defensive wards. The antechamber filled with brilliant flashes and deafening cracks. Blackwood, momentarily distracted, deflected Finch's assault with surprising agility. This was their chance. Jaxen closed his eyes, his neural interface connecting directly to the modified portrait Alara guarded. He felt the ancient magic of the painting surge around his cybernetics, not resisting, but interfacing. His mind became one with the network, 1,000 eyes, 1,000 ears, filtering through the data stream Aura was preparing. "Alara, now!" Jaxen yelled, his voice strained as he pushed his unique abilities to their limit. Alara, understanding, placed her hand firmly on the portrait's frame, pouring her own magic into its ancient canvas, reinforcing the connection. The founder's tapestry, Jaxen. It has a strong historical resonance. They won't be able to ignore that. Inside Jaxen's mind, Aura was a whirlwind of data, organizing, prioritizing, and translating raw magical readings into comprehensible visuals and audio. Grand projection protocol initiated. Subsystem integrity holding at 62. Brace for feedback. A searing white light erupted from the portrait Alara was touching, lancing through Blackwood's temporary shield and out into the corridor. It wasn't a destructive blast, but a focused beam of pure informational energy, arcing through the very magical ley lines of Hogwarts, heading straight for the Great Hall. Blackwood shrieked, her eyes widening in horrified realization. No, you can't. She launched a killing curse, green light erupting from her wand, aimed directly at Jaxen. Protego Maxima. Finch roared, throwing himself in front of Jaxen, a shimmering shield barely forming in time to absorb the brunt of the curse. The force threw Finch backwards, slamming him against the wall, but he was alive. Meanwhile, in the Great Hall, chaos erupted. It was a disciplinary hearing for Jaxen and Alara, convened by Blackwood herself, framed as an inquiry into disruptive and unethical magical practices. The Wiesengemot, a grim array of witches and wizards in dark robes, sat at the high table, their faces stern. Students, professors, and house elves watched from below, hushed and tense. Suddenly, the ancient founder's tapestry behind the high table, depicting the 4 Hogwarts founders standing proudly, began to shimmer. Its threads glowed with an ethereal light, then dissolved into a swirling vortex of energy. From its depths, images began to bloom. First, an overlay of arcane runes, pulsating with dark, forbidden energy, appeared across the tapestry. Alara's voice, amplified and echoing through the hall, cut through the stunned silence. These are runes of primal extraction, long forbidden. They drain latent magical energy from living beings, not for nourishment, but for augmentation. Then, the images shifted. The Wiesengemot gasped collectively. A hidden chamber, eerily familiar in its ancient stone, yet filled with strange, glowing apparatus. Screens displaying flickering waveforms of magical energy, some alarmingly unstable. A figure moved within the chamber, Headmistress Seraphina Blackwood herself, her face grimly determined, manipulating a pulsating orb of dark energy. These are real-time readings, captured by a network of sentient magical portraits, Aura's calm, synthesized voice explained, overlaying the images. Specifically, the concentration of dark magical energy from the orb exceeds safe parameters by an average of 4,700. The tapestry showed Blackwood speaking, her voice clear, her words chilling. The power is almost stable. Just a few more test subjects. The price is negligible compared to the purity it will bring. Hogwarts will be cleansed of any deviation. Jaxen poured every ounce of focus into maintaining the projection, his body trembling with the effort. He felt the magic of the portraits flowing through him, becoming an extension of his will. His cybernetics hummed with unprecedented intensity, his neural pathways processing a deluge of information, the portrait's feedback, Aura's data, Blackwood's frantic magical attacks from the antechamber, relayed via the network. This is impossible. Blackwood's voice, raw with fury, echoed from somewhere beyond the Great Hall's walls, her attempts to disrupt the projection futile against the combined might of Jaxen's tech magic and Alara's magical reinforcement. A trick. Muggle sorcery. It's no trick. Alara's voice, now physically present as she burst into the Great Hall, Professor Finch limping behind her, drew all eyes. She pointed a trembling finger at the tapestry. She's been siphoning ambient magic from the school, from students, to fuel these dark experiments. These runes, they speak of a power that corrupts and transforms, not merely enhances. The tapestry then displayed a series of magical energy signatures, distinct and identifiable, overlapping with the dangerous readings from Blackwood's orb. Note the residual magical signatures, Aura explained. Cross-referenced with student rosters, these readings correlate to a specific sequence of disappearances and reappearances of Hogwarts students over the past 3 months, each exhibiting temporary magical depletion or erratic abilities. A ripple of horror went through the hall. Parents among the Wisengamot clutched their chests, their faces ashen. Blackwood, having finally shattered the antechamber door, burst into the great hall, her robes torn, her face contorted with rage. Silence. This is an outrage. An assault on Hogwarts itself by a Muggleborn thing. She raised her wand, a wild, powerful curse forming. But it was too late. The Wisengamot was already on its feet. Senior Aurors, present for the hearing, moved swiftly. Headmistress Blackwood, by the authority of the Wisengamot, you are hereby suspended and taken into custody, one of them declared, his wand pointing directly at her. Blackwood roared, a desperate, animalistic sound, and unleashed her curse towards Jaxen, still maintaining the tapestry projection. But just as the spell flew, Professor Finch, though injured, managed to cast a powerful countercharm. The two spells collided midair, exploding in a shower of sparks that illuminated Jaxen, his eyes still closed, his body radiating an aura of shimmering, intertwined magic and cybernetic energy. As the Aurors finally subdued Blackwood, her frantic shouts about purity and abominations echoing through the hall, Jaxen slowly lowered his hands. The projection on the Founder's tapestry flickered once more, showing a final image of Blackwood's hidden lab, then solidified back into its ancient woven form. He opened his eyes. The great hall was silent, save for the sounds of Blackwood being taken away. Every single gaze was on him. No longer were they filled with suspicion or fear, but with awe, shock, and a dawning understanding. He had not merely resisted magic. He had used it, blended with it, to expose a truth that no traditional wizarding method could have revealed. Alara rushed to his side, her hand gripping his arm. Jaxen, you did it. You saved us. Her eyes, filled with a mixture of relief and admiration, met his. You were amazing. Professor Finch, helped up by a concerned colleague, offered a weak but genuine smile. Indeed, young man. You have redefined the impossible. Jaxen looked around at the faces, the students, the professors, even the grim-faced Wisengamot members. He saw acceptance, not just for him, but for the potential of what he represented. He felt the hum of aura within him, no longer a source of hidden shame, but a part of his strength. He had exposed a dangerous conspiracy, yes, but he had also unveiled something far greater, a path forward, where magic and technology could coexist, even thrive. The isolation he had carried for so long began to recede, replaced by a sense of belonging, a purpose. But as the great hall slowly erupted into chatter, a new thought solidified in Jaxen's mind. Blackwood's experiments were complex, driven by a need for purity. The way she extracted magic, the very type of magic she was trying to augment, it felt unnervingly familiar. It resonated with the fragmented memories of his own accident, the chaotic energy that had torn his body apart and necessitated his cybernetic rebirth. Could her quest for purity be linked to the incident that made him who he was? And if so, what other forbidden knowledge lay dormant in the ancient archives, waiting for someone unique enough to uncover it? Jaxen looked at Alara, a silent question passing between them. Their journey was far from over. The truth behind his own transformation, the lingering whisper of an ancient power Blackwood had sought, and the future of a world teetering on the edge of magical and technological convergence, all of it was just beginning to unfold. He was no longer just a cyborg outcast. He was a bridge, and the bridge had only just been built.